PACE is an acronym for Property Assessed Clean Energy, and it uses your tax bill to finance clean energy investments like solar panels on the roof or new boilers and chillers. And we've been working now for a couple years to build a concept that we call CivicPACE. And CivicPACE is about using PACE financing to make solar available for nonprofit organizations like schools, churches, affordable housing. And I think it's really important for program administrators and PACE programs in cities around the country to understand that CivicPACE is potentially one of the fastest growing and most important markets for PACE writ large. When Urban Ingenuity started building the Washington, D.C. PACE program, we assumed that it would be office buildings, it would be large green developers who wanted to do the right thing who would look to PACE. But what we found was that the lion's share of the demand for PACE is coming from community-based organizations who have these capital constraints, who desperately need additional operating income, and who see in PACE a structure that is well aligned with their capital needs and that fits very well into their projects.
The district is especially proud of two PACE projects in particular. The first is the Phyllis Wheatley YWCA, and the second is the Elsie Whitlow Stokes Public Charter School. Because of PACE, both of these projects could install solar, and the district has very aggressive solar goals, so PACE allowed us to continue to try to meet those goals.
We are an elementary school, pre-K through 5th grade, with 350 students. About half of our population is from low-income families, and then about 20% of our population are English language learning students. When we moved into the building, we renovated it completely, kind of gutted it from top to bottom, except for the HVAC system and the roof. So the roof and the HVAC system in the building for the last 9 years has been patched together by our maintenance crew.
We focused on preserving and developing affordable housing throughout the District of Columbia. This was a project that was really, really near and dear to our hearts with a historic building that stood here for over 100 years. Our interest is ensuring that folks in the District of Columbia, particularly the women that live here, that have mental health challenges and have special needs and otherwise wouldn't have a great place to live, had an opportunity to stay here.
We've been exploring how to take capital costs off the budgets of renovation projects for these nonprofit organizations so that they basically get free improvements to the building up front, and then over time what it does is bring down the operating costs as well.
Maybe about 6 years ago, our Board of Trustees put together a strategic plan for the school. And part of that strategic plan was addressing some of the facilities upgrades that were needed that we couldn't address when we renovated initially.
When the school moved in, they had a limited budget and they did what they could to improve the property. But a number of critical investments were needed to provide a comfortable, safe, high-quality learning environment for those students.
And we searched for options to get that work done. The PACE financing option allowed us to do so with little to no impact on our operating budget. We looked at a possible refinancing of our building. That would have cost us considerably more cash on the front end than the PACE financing option. We actually checked all of our boxes from our strategic plan, the facilities upgrade plan, and we were able to replace the roof in the building. We have solar panels on the roof now. We also replaced all of the lighting in the building with LED lighting, energy efficient lighting, and we completely retrofitted the HVAC system with a new boiler, a new chiller, new cooling tower on the roof, and we are in the process right now of putting new fan coil units in each of the rooms in the building. So all of our savings will be able to be put back into our operating funds that support all of the school's activities, including paying our tutors or supporting field trips for students or purchasing supplies and materials for teachers. Any savings at any point in the operation of the school is able to go back in and support our students.
So this is really the value proposition, 100% financing on the front end and reduced operating costs so that these mission-based organizations can spend their precious resources investing in serving the community, bringing affordable housing to low-income people, or making a quality education available for students of limited financial means. And the amazing thing about the CivicPACE process has been seeing how solar cannot be an added cost to a project, but solar can become a new source of financing, a new source of needed capital to make building improvements cheaper and bring more value to these mission-based organizations so that they can do more work in the community. And with PACE, we're not only making those projects greener, we're not only helping to make a better property rather than value engineering out all of those systems that would save money in operating budgets, but what we're seeing today is that CivicPACE is actually making the whole project viable at all. And we're finding that desperately needed affordable housing projects that otherwise might be stalled for a very long time because of a lack of capital are able to move forward with the use of CivicPACE as a critically needed source of gap finance.
The challenge we face in terms of financing affordable housing is one that I think is common to every developer throughout the country, is just filling the gap, the natural gap that occurs in affordable housing. So there are typical sources, and then after that you have to get creative about filling the gap. So that meant sort of retooling things from a financing standpoint and bringing in some tools that could make sure that we could make this financially viable in the long term from a cash flow perspective, and also making sure that the facilities themselves were redone in a way that would ensure that the project could operate the way that it should for 10, 15, 20 years. I think PACE allowed us to go further than we anticipated going originally from an energy efficiency standpoint. So we originally weren't planning to do solar panels, so that was something that was made possible by utilizing the PACE program. Secondly, we were able to put measurement and verification tools into the project that will allow us to see how we're operating and functioning in real time. So if we've got systems in place that should be efficient and operating at a certain level and there's some deficiency, we'll be able to know that immediately, as opposed to having to wait until the end of a month or the end of a quarter or a year and seeing that our utility bills aren't coming out the way that we originally anticipated. And then also allowed us to be more efficient in terms of the HVAC systems that we were using and some of the other systems that we put in the building to further drive down our utility expenses. Challenges we encountered with PACE were twofold. So I think the first one was us as the developer really getting comfortable with the economics and knowing that the savings that we were generating was going to be enough to more than pay for the note that we were taking on with the PACE financing, which we were able to do by working with a really talented group of engineers to sort of verify information. The second piece was just working with a program that was new. So capital providers tend to be conservative by nature, and the new is something that takes time for folks to wrap their arms around. So it was just a matter of sort of educating people about how the program worked, how this functioned differently than a typical loan. It's actually a tax assessment against the property as opposed to a conventional deed of trust on the property. So once people understood that, and then we had to take that to HUD as well, because we have public housing units here at the property. So there was yet another layer of review that was both local and sort of federal as well. So again, once we got through that education process, everyone got comfortable, we were able to move forward, but sort of understanding for ourselves that the economics work and then being able to educate our capital partners were the two biggest challenges. I think the biggest impact of being able to use PACE funds and being able to put higher efficiency systems in and ensure that our utilities were low gets back to our initial reason for really wanting to work with the Phyllis Wheatley YWC on this project initially, and that was to ensure long-term viability. So by creating yet another mechanism to control expenses, we can ensure that this is a property that will hopefully be around for another 105 or so years on this site by driving economic sustainability, and not just sustainability as we tend to think of it in terms of being thoughtful about using resources and trying to keep our carbon footprint low.
Because of PACE, these two institutions were able to implement both energy efficiency and solar measures. This meant not only that the city could reduce our carbon footprint, but it also meant lower utility costs for these two important nonprofits.
I absolutely think PACE is a tool that we'll look to use in the future. We're actually looking at some other projects now and thinking that this might be a way to make those projects go. For anyone that's considering this as a tool, I would just encourage you not to be scared to look at this.
If there are other school administrators or leaders that are thinking about similar types of renovation, I highly recommend the PACE project.
PACE for Nonprofits is really an exciting solution. These are organizations with very, very tight budgets, and they watch what they do with every penny incredibly closely. So these are consumers who are very concerned about interest rates, very concerned about the life cycle cost of the money that they use to improve their properties. With CivicPACE, we've been able to experiment with bringing tax-exempt dollars to bear to dramatically lower the cost of debt finance for these properties. So we're using the very best of PACE, providing long-term fixed-rate financing to reduce the total cost of the project. But then we are also using tax-exempt dollars to further lower the cost. And what we're finding is that this market is robust. In just about every community there are these sorts of nonprofit organizations with major deferred maintenance needs who are looking for a new source of capital that can help answer their needs. And CivicPACE really is it's a custom solution designed just for them. We'd love to see it made available nationwide.